Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we will be discussing the Modi government's key agenda relating to Digital India. Now, what is Digital India all about? Different people have different perceptions of Digital India. Some people perceive Digital India to be a future India which is totally wired. People are empowered with digital platforms, mobiles, with smartphones in their hands. It's also about e-governance, how government works in a corruption-free and transparent way. It's about the interface between government and the citizen. So there are several components to Digital India. And today to discuss this, we have with us a very special guest who combines his experience as a parliamentarian for the last 8 years, member of Rajya Sabha, as well as he's been an entrepreneur and he had run a successful telecom company, understands the internet. So these two qualities come together in Rajeev Chandrasekhar, who's a member of Rajya Sabha. Welcome to our show, Rajeev. So, in fact, we chose you because we find that sometimes industry people do not have appreciation of how legislature works or how government works. You've been in the industry now, you sold all your business, now you're in legislature, very active on the internet. Some people call you an internet activist also, policy activist. So we thought you were the right person to talk to. So please tell us, what is Narendra Modi's vision about Digital India all about? How do you explain it to a class of 12th class students?
Okay, I can't speak for Prime Minister Modi, but I think the construct of Digital India is in parts what you were alluding to. It has got a bit of all of that. But at the heart of Digital India, in my opinion, is the issue of wiring up the government and making the government more technologically enabled with the end objective of making government more efficient on one end, because government today as a monolith is seen as being very inefficient, very expensive, and with a full of red tape. So on one end of the spectrum, Digital India is transformational for government efficiency and government responsiveness. On the other end of the spectrum, government, because of its transparency, because of its wired nature, becomes much more open. And therefore the transformation is for the citizen-government interaction. So you have efficient government and you have honest government because it is much more transparent and accountable. So you have these two things happening as a consequence of Digital India. Now, like you said, Digital India is primarily about the citizen of India. Making the government more efficient and more accountable is not something that the government easily embraces. It is being forced on it because people of India want that from its government. That is the expectation.
Yeah, it's interesting you say this because this morning I read a Facebook post by a journalist, a fairly senior journalist, who says that she's not been able to register her marriage because the UP government or the Delhi government, the procedure to do a simple registration of marriage is so complicated.
Absolutely.
So maybe Digital India can...
And I think that is the point that people miss, that the engagement between a citizen and the government is at so many different levels. In Delhi, we tend to think that the engagement between citizen and government is only to do with policy. It is not. It is for your ration card, it is for your PDS, it is for your death certificate, it is for your marriage certificate, it is for your bank account, it is for your passport. Now, in bits and pieces, some of these things are becoming easier. But if you look at where it has become easier, for example, passport, the whole process of passport, getting a passport, over the last 6-7 years has become far easier and less stressful and less to do with middlemen kind of experience. Why? Because of technology. So when you start immersing technology into the heart of government activity, you effectively create many side effects. One is, of course, like I said, government becomes more efficient. Second is government is forced to be more transparent and open. And third part of it is that citizens who are engaging with the government get better services and of course get a much more accountable and transparent government.
So, and how do you, Rajiv, link this to the broader internet policy? Because you said that there has to be a policy framework which sits at the bottom of all these other activities which flow from it, right?
Yeah, and that I think is the key here, MK. But because I think we all talk about digital India and we all want all of this to happen, but we also must know that there are some things that need to be done for this to happen.
Yeah.
Just like the internet was a collaborative, it's innovative. It was seen to be innovative because many millions of people collaborated to make it happen. It was not one man's invention. It was one man's idea, but 100 million people worked all over the world to make the internet happen. Similarly, I think the government here needs to create an ecosystem of policy, people working on digital India. It cannot be anybody's case that the digital India will be constructed from Delhi, architected from Delhi and built in Delhi.
It has to be a totally decentralized process.
It has to be conceived in Delhi by the Prime Minister. It has to be enabled by the Department of Telecommunication. But hundreds of thousands of young, old Indians will have to contribute to make digital India a reality. But at the heart of it is the role of the Department of Telecom and the Minister of Telecom in creating a policy framework, in a lot of ways moving DOT from being a policeman to being an enabler, in allowing people to work without having horrendous licensing and other restrictions, and creating an overall environment where freedom of innovation, freedom of expression is not a threat to the government, rather that it's something that you expect.
Okay, but are you satisfied with the way this government views some of the aspects that you just spoke about, the essential policy framework? Because one felt that the previous regime also had a tendency,
right,
which state always has a tendency to clamp down on Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts. This government seems to have, going by media reports, gone even further than the previous government in restricting freedoms on the internet, etc. For instance, the recent ban on the documentary done by a British lady, they banned it from being shown on television channels, but it was soon posted on YouTube. So they soon realized that the whole cyber world or internet world is so complex.
Right.
So now I'm talking about mindset. How do you see the mindset of this government?
I feel really that the establishment...
Are they controlling their instincts?
No, I think any establishment, whether it is an establishment that is in the past or...
Yeah, I'm not differentiating.
Yeah, any establishment has an inherent aversion to criticism. Okay, and I think it would be best if this government and this mandate of 2014 represented a change from that mindset.
Okay,
I believe that. I think the mindset, the mandate for 2014 was a mandate from the youth as much as it was from every other demographic.
So it was for more openness.
Yeah, and I think young India wants governments to be confident about themselves and not be paranoid.
Paranoid, yeah.
Governments should be
transparent
and not closed and afraid of disclosure. Government should be not afraid of debate, should encourage debate. You could have in the process of debate some views that are unacceptable, but those views should be treated just as that, as unacceptable and to be ignored. In today's world, censorship and banning is impractical. That is the reality of today's modern digital media world.
Yeah.
You can press a button to ban something here, it will pop up here. So banning is not an answer. Banning is never a solution in this framework. When the video was banned, I said very clearly on my official page, I said we should be angry, not at the video, we should be angry at the outrage against women.
Yeah.
And so if there is a video that is unacceptable or illegally made, let's prosecute the video under that basis. So if it is illegally made, if the producer has violated some rules of or the terms of the contract between Tihar, she should be prosecuted for that, and fully so, whether it's BBC or ABCD or whoever. But I think we should not be afraid to talk about what is really ailing our society, and people should be free to debate and discuss.
Yeah. No, so this is also in some ways freedom of expression.
Absolutely.
Is embedded in the new framework of Digital India.
No, Digital India, like I said, it is all about the younger generations and the future generations coming into the mainstream, being part of politics and governance is another fallout of Digital India. Now, you can't get them involved, and you will prevent them from getting involved if you start creating these barriers around their ability to speak. Now, it is quite possible that in a lot of cases, some people speak something that is not to your liking. But that is what you should do. If you don't like it, you walk away from it. But you can't ban it. There is a famous saying, and national security and cyber security is one reason that is used a lot to muzzle free expression.
Which Chinese do
so they use
habitually.
And for China, the whole world is an enemy, so they can keep saying that. But in India, we are a democracy. We are a liberal democracy, and so therefore we should encourage free speech. And Obama famously said, I reject the notion that there has to be a compromise between national security and freedom of expression.
Okay.
So I endorse that. I don't think these are two A or B. You can have a secure country and you can have free speech. And you can have both of them very, very solidly. You don't have to say it's A or B. So I think,
although Americans have not set a perfect example of that,
but
in terms of their snooping capacities there.
Yeah, I think that is a separate issue of privacy. I think the Americans don't prevent you from saying what you have to say.
Sure.
But it's a different issue that they snoop on what you say on private emails. That's a completely separate issue of privacy, which is again part of Digital India, which is
a very important part of Digital India.
Privacy and the availability of your personal information to people who are not authorized to get it is a completely untouched, untapped, uncharted territory in Indian legislation.
Yeah, sure. In fact, there was an amendment in 2006 or 7 which empowered the government under the IT Act to actually tap telephones on economic offences.
Yeah,
on suspicion.
That was on the SEBI Act.
Yeah,
SEBI Amendment Act. Yes.
Yeah. So you feel that a lot of these things would need to be reviewed in the larger policy framework.
I think Digital India is a great goal. We must get there. It will empower millions of Indians. It will take our government into a new form of government. But for Digital India to be to become a reality, there are a number of issues that need to be addressed.
Okay.
Privacy, freedom of expression. What is the definition of freedom of expression, and what are the limits, if any, that have to be placed? That has to be debated.
And infrastructure
creation. What is the
creation.
government's role in management of the internet? Is it the government going to manage it, or is it an enabler?
Enabler, okay.
So, number of these issues have to be
We'll come back to some of these components, but after a small break. Please don't go and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are discussing Digital India and its various components, essential components to make it a success with Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, member of Rajya Sabha. So Rajeev, now what are the essential components that you spoke about them briefly, but can you elaborate? What is the government job? What is the private sector's job? And policy and regulation, which is the third bucket. Now, how do these three come together?
Now, let's look at Digital India and let's break it up and say what are the things that the government ought to be doing.
Yeah.
One is, I think clearly the government needs to figure out and have a clear position and what is their idea, what is their thinking on how the internet will be managed.
Okay.
Currently, internet is managed by ICANN. It's a US-based organization, and there has been a lot of global pressure that the US domination on the internet should be replaced by something much more global.
Yeah, India also has a view on that.
Yeah, India has a view on it, and unfortunately,
India feels we should be more decentralized.
Yeah, and the world feels it, and the US has agreed to it. Yeah. Now the issue there is that some countries like China and unfortunately India has become part of that group.
And Russia, etc.
And Russia, which are all not examples of free democracy.
Yeah.
Are pushing for a model where governments will control the internet.
Yeah. Or there's some state control over the internet, yeah.
Whereas the Western European countries and all the IT countries like Korea, Japan, Western Europe, all believe that it should be a multi-stakeholder kind of a model where citizens and NGOs and consumer groups and innovators all form like an ICANN-like body, but a global ICANN-like body.
Okay.
Now, I have been fighting this for the last four years, ever since the government, UPA government proposed this United Nations kind of a model to manage the internet. I believe there is no way that bureaucrats and politicians should ever come anywhere near managing what is essentially a collaborative world of innovation and creativity. They can't be managing it. I can't imagine the Chinese government and an Indian bureaucrat sitting in Geneva once a year deciding the future of the internet. It should be a young Flipkart type of a CEO out of Bangalore and a creative gentleman out of Western Europe somewhere, internet technology people sitting there and collaboratively deciding how the internet will go. So that is one. That is the management of the internet.
There's a global policy piece also. There's a national policy.
So on the national policy again, the role of the Department of Telecom should become more and more of an enabler rather than being the control on the net. So that is the second piece. The third piece is on what is the government's view on Section 66A and the IT Act itself. I believe, and I think you are aware of this, that the IT Act was passed in Parliament with no debate.
I know.
It was passed in the din. So all of these problems today that we have, including these Section 66A and all of its onerous sort of definitions of, incitement and, all of that, has not passed parliamentary scrutiny. It must necessarily be reviewed. The government must bring a new act. Let's have a completely...
Have you worked on some ideas around this?
I've
As a parliamentarian,
I have intervened in Parliament. I have a PIL in the Supreme Court on Section 66A. So I have agitated...
According to you, it's very draconian.
I think it is draconian and it is very, very, very prone to misuse. It can be misused.
I'm told there are already examples of misuse. There are cyber divisions of Mumbai police, Bangalore police, which keep calling people on the slightest suspicion of some Twitter account saying something.
If you do not define a crime explicitly and it is left to the discretion of an enforcement officer to decide whether there's a crime or not, invariably when it comes to playing safe, it will be enforced. Crimes in any criminal code have to be explicitly defined. You can't say...
So this is part of the legal framework that you're talking
about.
Correct.
This is Section 66A. This is the third piece.
And your PIL is coming up for hearings?
It has been heard. It is now, the hearings are concluded and the Supreme Court will rule on it. We have challenged it and I have challenged it along with many others that this impinges on our constitutional right to free speech.
Have you tried to speak to fellow MPs? And try to get their buy-in on this?
This matter on Section 66A has come up in Parliament twice. It almost got put to a vote during the UPA and the government would have lost the vote. Kapil Sibal on the floor of the House stood up and said he assured the House that he will relook at Section 66A and the IT Act, and he never did it.
Another of UPA's good intentions not translated.
No, and I think they misjudge the mood of the nation when it comes to these things. People, the young Indian...
Which is the most draconian part of the Section 66A?
I mean, the whole Section 66A is not about draconian bit. It is about how you interpret it. When you don't have a definition of defamation, incitement, you don't have a definition. You can accuse me of inciting somebody and that's it. There is no threshold of evidence that has to be passed in the Section 66A.
And now coming down to the economic aspect of Digital India, we keep hearing that it's going to empower the millions of Indians, mobile phones, now some 900 million, self-employed, 50% of India's employed are self-employed, a smartphone in their hands, smartphone in the farmer's hand, will give him information, will connect him with necessary institutions. Now, where do you see this happening? At the moment, there is another view that there is a huge digital divide between haves and have-nots. Now, are we talking about Digital India in a vacuum, or are we actually genuinely empowering millions of, billions of people?
I think, and that is the danger for Digital India, that if it is not properly articulated and properly implemented, that it will be something which becomes a creamy layer, elitist thing of having, whatever on your digital phone. But the crux of Digital India is the Jan Dhan Yojana, the whole issue of architecting or re-architecting the subsidy and the poverty programs. And that is the biggest bang for the buck that Digital India can deliver for the government, which is to re-architect the actual subsidy delivery platform. So when in the budget it talks about JAM, Jandan Yojana, Aadhaar and the mobile phone, it is essentially the heart and soul of digital India.
So you bypass the corrupt bureaucracy.
You disintermediate, you take away all these intermediaries that are famously taking away the 95 paisa out of every rupee that is flowing to the poor. And you replace that intermediation with this platform, which is effectively taking digital India right to the doorstep or to the hand of the person for whom the money is. So that will, once that is successfully implemented, it will take care of any impression in anybody's mind that this is an elitist kind of.
So you're saying that this is the biggest piece in the government and poor citizens interface.
The biggest piece between government and citizenry is the digital India piece that will take care of subsidies and the poor.
The delivery of subsidies, especially to the poor.
So if people think digital India is about Facebook and Twitter, it is not. Digital India is about this.
Okay. Rajeev, I recently interviewed again on Rajya Sabha TV an IIM Bangalore professor, and he has done a lot of project with his students in rural Karnataka, to see exactly how is this Jan Dhan program shaping up. And he says that in the really remote villages, there is no infrastructure as yet for people to be delivered. Somebody has to go there with a handheld ATM or whatever. Banking State Bank of India has set up some 20,000 banking correspondents. Very expensive. Costs are a big problem. Even if you don't operate these accounts, they cost 100 rupees per account. When you operate it, cost goes up. Have you studied some of these aspects? Because he says that there are a lot of problems. The banks and the insurance companies are saying it's not so easy to operationalize these accounts.
No, I don't think anybody is making the case that this is easy. I mean, I don't think anybody just said it's drawing a box and plugging into cables and powering it up.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is about what is digital India. It is about taking government to the last mile, to the last person,
the poorest.
By definition of that objective, but the moment you say it, you know it is not a trivial task. It is not just about laying fiber and saying, I will light it up. This is about taking technology and access to technology to the doorstep of that person in North Karnataka.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, who, by the way, is yet to see water, is yet to see electricity, even perhaps.
So and a bank account.
And a bank. And therefore, I mean, bank account is quite low on the priority of things. I mean, if he doesn't have a road, water and access to sanitation and health, bank account is the furthest thing from that person's mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it is not trivial at all. That is why I said that is why we must understand digital India is a complex task. It is not just about Facebook, Twitter and some people tweeting off of smartphones. Exactly. This is a complex issue that at the heart of it is about bridging the government and taking the government to this last mile who have been deprived of government or access to government, accepting through middlemen and intermediaries for the last 65 years. So this is a tough job. Now, that is why I am saying the government cannot do this on its own. This cannot be a framework of government laying fiber to all of these 64,000 villages. This has to be where the government is an enabler, an ecosystem is created or a policy framework is created where people are creating, private initiatives are creating these networks. At the end of these networks are these services or apps, as whichever way you want to call it, which will give access to that per family, to banking, to money transfers, etc., etc.
So in that,
it is not easy.
So in that sense, this is probably the biggest public-private partnership project.
I believe it is the biggest private-public partnership. It should be a private-public partnership or government-citizen partnership, whichever way you want to call it. And this has huge transformational objectives and huge transformational effects if executed well.
If executed well is the big if. Thank you very much, Rajeev Chandrasekhar, for talking to us and sharing your thoughts. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.